Thank you. Okay, thanks you all for coming today. We're going to begin by kind of taking you into the rainforest. So we're going to go to the rainforest of Indonesia, in Sumatra. And when you're in the forest, one of the things that strikes you the most is the sound, if not the thing that strikes you the most. Can we turn it up a little bit, actually? Yeah. There's a cacophony of noise at all times. But if you listen carefully, there's some things that kind of stick out. You can hear some birds, some chirping. You can hear these amazing gibbons. These are amazing apes that are huge apes that swing through the trees and sing to each other from a great distance. The essence of the forest is sound. And there's many ways to actually interpret that sound. This is a spectrogram, we call it. It's one way to visualize what's there. At the top, you can see these cicadas. You can see some birds. And coming up, can you turn up some more? These are the gibbons. This is a great way for us to kind of put all the sound together and understand what's actually happening there. And you'll see a lot of these in the talk today, so it's important to show you. But behind all of this in the forest that you're listening to, there were some threats. And coming up on the right, amongst all the animals and all the sound, you can hear a chainsaw at the bottom. You guys can hear that? Yeah, so this is in Sumatra, where logging and biodiversity sort of go hand in hand. Though certainly we'd like to do something about that. So actually, how do we stop illegal logging? Well, as she mentioned, I'm a technologist. I'm from San Francisco, and of course, there has to be a technological solution, or at least a tool for anything. So here's the idea. The moment that a chainsaw goes off in the forest, the sound is picked up by a device in the trees, transmitted over the cell phone network to rangers on the ground who can show up, jump on their motorcycles, and get out there and stop the loggers on the spot in this perfectly realistic rendition of exactly how it happens in the forest at all times. But of course, to do this, you need a device. So we take old smartphones, we see here, we put them in a box with solar panels and a powerful microphone, and they can listen to all the sounds of the forest at all times and stream it up to the cloud, as you can kind of see here. This is me putting it together in my parents' garage in San Francisco, which is like a necessary step in all Silicon Valley stories, of course. But then, of course, that's not so useful in San Francisco. You got to take it out to the forest and walk out, and then climb high in trees to put them up there, because you can get better sunlight up there. You can hear sounds from far away. Of course, that's where the problems are. So you have to take the technology to where it is on the ground and climb up to the top. Up there, of course, you can hear so much more, and you can hear chainsaws pretty far away. So this is what it looks like up in the tree. This is sort of a story. The first time we tested this was in Sumatra, took it out there. I decided to show you this clip. This is I'd actually been in the forest for the first time. I built this over the course of several months and went out there, and then suddenly, an alarm goes off, and we rush out there, and this guy's going over the hill, and I have no idea what's going on in the forest for like 2 days. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but he moves forward, so I got to go. And so we're walking up over the hill. And this was the first test case we had back in 2013. We're actually able to stop the loggers based upon rangers there on the ground. This was kind of our trial by fire in that picture, in that actual situation. To do this, of course, can we turn it up, turn the sound up? To do this, of course, we're not having people listening. Let's leave the sound up, actually. There's no one listening to this. We're using artificial intelligence to pick things out. This is what a chainsaw sounds like. You can see the spectrogram up there as well. And you'll see a lot of these. So for a use case, let's go into the Amazon. So if you go to Brazil, another place where we put it, you can see this ocean of deforestation out there on the edge, but these islands of pretty intact forest. Those are not actually protected areas in the traditional sense. Those are indigenous areas, areas that are actually owned and of course, lived in by indigenous people. This is the Tembe tribe. There's about 1,500 of them left for an area about the size of 2,500 square kilometers. And when we met them in 2014, this entire purple area was occupied by illegal loggers, settlers, and drug cartels. So just driving from one town to the next, you don't run across these full-on trucks, fully stocked. The only thing these tribes could do was just sort of book it and get out of there as fast as they could. So for them, it was an existential threat, this tribe. So to respond, they trained 30 young rangers and decided they were actually going to protect this entire area. But it's a pretty big area, as you can tell. 2,500 square kilometers for 30 rangers, oftentimes without vehicles. So a system like this was something that they actually asked for. We trained them to climb in trees, just like you saw me doing. And they were able to install these throughout their forest. And a situation kind of like this, just to remind you, the moment a chainsaw goes off in the forest, picked up by the device, transmits to the cloud, back to the rangers on the ground, the ones you just saw, who were able to show up and stop it, hopefully in real time, or at least as we would. This is what it kind of looks like in practice. We build an app the rangers receive. And so in this particular case, this is real data coming out of Brazil. Let's see if the sound turned way up. They were able to get out there. They were able to get the entire ranger force out to the end of the road. Unfortunately, it was too late to stop the logging, but at the end of the road, they were able to grab the truck, grab the equipment, burn the truck, push the loggers off the land, and take matters into their own hands. This is actually what we need people to do in many cases. There's no law enforcement in the area. It's entirely up to these people to protect their own land, and they're willing to take responsibility for it. And that's why these guys, these rangers, are oftentimes the best vector for fighting climate change. Because if you look at climate change, up to 20%, almost a fifth of all carbon emissions every year comes from deforestation. That's more than all the transportation, like cars, trucks, planes, ships. Combined, that doesn't add up to deforestation's carbon impacts. And up to 90% of the logging in places like what you just saw is illegal. If it's illegal, there's a mandate to stop it. And of course, not all deforestation comes from logging, but logging, illegal logging especially, is so profitable that they'll cut a road right through the forest. Roads are really hard through the forest. Once the road is there, that leads to fires, it leads to smaller farms, smaller deforestation. And so a single road can destroy an entire region of forest. If you can stop the illegal logging, you can stop the roads. If you can stop the roads, you can stop the wholesale destruction of the forest, which means that stopping illegal logging could be the fastest, cheapest way for us to fight climate change around the world today, if not absolutely necessary. And that's where these guys make such a difference. So this idea of the system that you've seen, this sort of nervous system for the natural world, you sense it, you perceive what's there, you understand it, and you get people back in the field to do something about it, this sort of nervous system. And I sort of like to think about it as like a nervous system for the natural world, like a connected nodes around the world that allows us to understand what's happening and trigger a response based upon a real understanding of what's there, very much like the human body. And, I hope that we can build something quite like that for the entire planet. And we're actually we're making some progress on that. So what you just saw, you saw it in Brazil, you saw it a little bit in Sumatra. We're actually in 22 countries around the world already, covering many, many thousands of square kilometers of forest. And you can see the system is very much needed, but of course the forest is large, there's a lot more work to do. So let's look at a few more use cases. Again, here's in Peru, where they're able to catch the loggers. This is back in Indonesia, where they caught the loggers and seized the wood. And then another one out of Brazil, where they are, again, destroying trucks. It's one of the only things they can do when there's no law enforcement in the area. But it's not just about stopping logging, right? As you've heard, what's in the forest is really, really amazing from a sound perspective. So we have an app. Every single device we put up in the trees has a live audio stream that anyone can listen into. You can as well. And they're able to listen live around the forest. It's not always very calming. The forest is pretty noisy, as we'll get into. But there's a lot of stuff happening in there. So let's look at what we're able to do when we apply some of the same techniques for catching logging to biodiversity as well. So again, in the spectrogram, the logging is there at the bottom. It's just a small piece, but so much more than that is able to pick out. An AI model can pick out, as you see, vehicle, cicadas, crickets. You're seeing gibbons being picked out. There's some birds coming up, I believe. And we're able to take these models and run them across every single second of audio that's coming in to our system at all times. And of course, archival audio as well. We're able to build a real map of what's happening out there in the forest. So how is this useful for protecting it? Well, let's actually look into another use case out of Africa. We talked about some stuff happening in Tanzania. Here in the Congo, there's these shy forest elephants. There's a group out of Cornell University that wanted to track them. They're very, very hard to track, so they put these recorders up. But just finding these few instances where the elephants would show up was very, very hard. We were able to build a model with the elephants, and here's an amazing instance. Okay, so we had to track elephants because elephants are also a threat to local people. So, the human-wildlife conflict can be pretty daunting. But when elephants are going onto farms, they use these rumbles, these slow rumbles. So being able to build a model to pick it out was pretty important, and it's always very charming to me to imagine this lonely elephant walking through the forest, just grumbling to himself. This travels great distance through the ground. They're wonderful. Here's another use case out of, this time, Costa Rica. Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, very biodiverse, amazing place. These are spider monkeys. You wouldn't think that spider monkeys, can we turn the sound up, were necessary for actually spreading the forest, but they spread the seeds. They eat the fruit, they spread the seeds, and they're very, very critical for that process. However, there's one instance where we saw that spider monkeys were making noise at nighttime, and we're like, what's up with that? So we listen in, and we're able to understand that the spider monkeys were woken up because there was an earthquake. So the spider monkeys, actually just listen in. You'll hear this tree go nuts. Cicadas stop. Tree starts shaking around. You can hear some frogs freaking out as well. And then this earthquake ends, and these monkeys go nuts. They scream at each other for a good 30, 45 minutes. It was that event that actually brought us to understand what was there. So these sort of events of what's happening, of course, this one is a pretty big event, but animals can tell you what's happening in the forest. There's a lot to glean from that. Now, again, as you saw from last talk, biodiversity is hugely important at this particular moment. There's 1.5 million species that are out there. What can we do instead of just identifying individual single species? Well, here's an example when we put all those things together out of Peru. This is a tool that we built for ourselves to be able to get it. You're pretty used to these spectrograms by now. What you're seeing up here in the top is 11 species that are detected 30 seconds before or after. So these ARs are being applied now to be able to pick out literally hundreds of species in individual areas for us to be able to tell down to the second and across months, if not years, the movement and the presence of these species in the area. It becomes pretty bio-intense. It's pretty great, amazing. All that becomes possible because of this device we put up on the tops of the trees. When you put up enough of these devices up there, which we're in the process of doing around the world, you're able to then start to see the concentrations in very, very high time precision and across large areas, almost heat maps for the movement of species, which is critically important as climate change takes over and pushes the planet to the brink, because animals themselves are reacting. Some animals, of course, as mentioned, are going extinct, and others are adapting. There's entire behaviors that are being unlocked right now, and this becomes possible with technology, possible for us to understand that and see that through technology like this, as we're doing already in multiple places around the world. So when you look at the amount of audio we're bringing in, this is so important because in the audio, as you saw, there's entire expressions of behavior, personality. These animals are saying things to each other that we ourselves can barely understand. This is an entire year's worth of audio mapped, and you can see almost the changing of the seasons. You can see the movement of species across time. What happens when you take a year of sound and put it on a screen? This is a year expressed just in the sound of the forest. So beyond that, we say the 1.5 million species that have been described, that's potentially less than 20% of all the species that are out there, right? And so in this moment, this is so important for us. If you go back for a second, you can see that here, these maps, we're just kind of talking about the land, and of course it goes in the water as well. So in the water, of course, there's a lot of sound. Sound travels pretty well through the water. And here you have these whales, but whales are pretty threatened by ships in a lot of areas. So the same system we're using to detect chainsaws in the forest can be used to help find ships and also protect whales. One use case for this is in Vancouver Bay in Canada, where these southern resident orca whales, of which there's only 70 of this subspecies left, every single time they vocalize, in this area, in the shipping lanes, we're able to get people out there and they're able to scramble and take the ships out of the shipping lanes and protect these whales from collisions with the ships, which does cause a lot of mortality in the species. We have these buoys out there. We don't build these, but we're able to use the exact same system that you saw for monitoring sound underwater, and are plugging in the exact same technology to accomplish a conservation goal in the water as well as on land. And honestly, whales are so amazing, cognitively advanced creatures. They speak to each other. Just listen to this. Here, they're hunting, they're having conversations. And in fact, in this case, this is a super gathering of whales because a newborn in this small population was actually born. So they got together and partied for almost 2 or 3 days just to welcome this baby into the world. So when we look across the whole world, we can see that obviously cities are expanding quite a bit. And there's a lot that we can do about that. This moment matters so much to us. We know that biodiversity is super intense over the course of our existence. But if we look back to when human species came onto this planet, which according to this graph was 200,000 years ago, let's just add 100,000 onto that. Since humans have existed on this planet, there's not been this rapid change, this much of a delta in biodiversity. And that change is what actually brings out the behaviors and the adaptation of animals. There's so many secrets that are locked into the evolutionary experiences of these animals that we have to be able to capture. And at no point in the future of humanity will we ever have as much biodiversity as we have right now. We can reverse climate change. We cannot reverse biodiversity loss. And we cannot suddenly stop biodiversity loss. So this is the most important moment in biodiversity possibly forever. And scientists, hundreds, if not thousands of years in the future, are going to wish that we were capturing this moment for them. And that's what brings us to this. Our moonshot over the next 10 years, because we have to do it now, 10 years from now, the world will be different. There'll be less biodiversity, is to capture an hour of audio for every person that'll be on the planet by 2030. 8.5 billion hours of audio from every corner of the land and the sea, using these devices, using more. This is our moonshot. We have to do this because this is the expression of life right now. And we want to make sure that we don't lose it forever, to make sure that we can capture some more of these species and also just this moment in behavior, because genetics, fossils, these things can't bring out what it means to be alive, but sound absolutely can. So hope you'll join us in this, and hope we can talk more. Thanks so much. Thank you.